Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. If you could describe this season in one word, what word would you choose?
Recording in progress.
For both of us. That's a tough one. I have not tried to sum it up in one word yet. Do you have one?
I'd use a couple words. Good.
Progression.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'd say every season's the same way. It's adversity and overcoming it, and then the big picture perspective, I'd say progression. But I think adversity's the name of the game, and I think finding ways to overcome it are critical.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going in your pregame in Minnesota, they posted a video of you talking about that the only thing to fear was not leaving it all out there. Do you feel like you got everything your guys had to give you?
Yeah, I did, especially, and I think going down a goal and then finding our way back into it after having the goal nullified, I think speaks volumes of the mentality of the group, and they're leaving it all on the field. Before the game, I tap back into old Theodore Roosevelt, the man in the arena, and it's really easy for people on the outside to opine. But again, it's only the guys in the arena that have a chance for victory, and at the same time, just dealing with defeat and staring defeat right in the eyes. And so the most important thing is to walk in that place and leave it all on the field, and I think they did that.
And most of what we learn comes in reflection, and I would be interested in both of you, what you've learned from this season as you've reflected from the loss until now.
I think there's not just one thing. I think every day you pick up, little lessons, and I think it was the resiliency and the adaptability of the group that we had. I think it was something I learned about the group, and asking them to come into this season. There was obviously some new faces, but there was a lot of old faces that had been with us for a number of years, and play a different style, a different game model, and how quickly they took to that was impressive, and I think a credit to the players. And so, learning their ability to adapt was a valuable part of it.
Yeah, I would say, I think that's a good word, adaptability. And, I think just from a coaching perspective, there was, I think, 5 new coaches on the staff, which is like 90% of the staff, or probably a little bit less. And so we all had to adapt. And I think that we were a microcosm of that ability to have things that weren't the way you wanted them. In other words, stepping outside your comfort zone, figuring out a way to work together as a coaching staff, and the players adapting to the way that we wanted to play. And so I think there was a lot of behind-the-scenes growth that translated onto the field. And I think from a reflection perspective, we improved our game model in almost every statistical area, and I think it's been just so wonderful to watch and see the progress and know that there's a fantastic foundation to continue building on, and then obviously all the struggles that you learn as a competitor, as a teammate, as a coach, those things will fortify you moving forward as well. And so but there was definitely a lot of ups and downs. It wasn't easy, but there's where I find solace is there weren't excuses. There was just a constant search for solutions, and I think that speaks volumes to the guys in the locker room.
Can I ask one more? Do you have any regrets of the season that stand out to you? Things you would do differently, or adjustments you might make next year?
I don't live like that. I think regret is a strong word for me. I never regret anything. I think if I didn't know something, then I learned from it. And there's a lot to learn from. and there's so many different areas to learn from. So no, I don't think there's any regret.
Obviously, the Gomez transfer comes at a crucial time in the season, and not that results drop off entirely, but I guess wondering are there any lessons learned or thoughts on how you handle those types of things going forward? It's record transfer. I don't think anyone can fault you for that, but and also just kind of wondering from your perspective. I mean, what are those conversations like when you're in the midst of a run like that and you have to make an important business decision like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of considerations that come into play when just selling players at any time, but especially mid-season like that. As you said, the transfer fee was a record, and it was more than the money. It was a proof of concept for us as we've come in. When new ownership has come in, they've been very supportive about investing in younger, talented players. Andreas being one of the first of those that we brought in. And so being able to show that we can bring a player in, the coaching staff can develop him, and we can turn him into a saleable asset and then execute that transaction is valuable. It's valuable for the club. It obviously adds revenue for us to hopefully continue to do that again and again. It also helps us in the marketplace, right? And I think, we brought in Dominik Marczuk, who's another really good young player, just got called up to the full Polish national team. And I think a factor in his decision and other young players' decisions in the future will be, these guys show that they can be a pathway for us. And so I think it's going to help pave the way for us to continue to bring in those young, talented players that can contribute. And look, from a scouting standpoint, we always have to be ready for those types of things. So it's a very challenging situation, but again, is it right for the club? Is it right for the player? Obviously, it's a huge opportunity for the player. Of course, we would have preferred and in an ideal world keep him till the end of the season, but there's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees that the offer's still there in the summer, that they'll loan him back to you. Obviously, that's something that maybe doesn't happen. There's his health, there's his form. Like, there's no guarantees that the same thing's going to be there for you 6 months down the road, and so we have to weigh all those things against each other. And Pablo can talk more about it, but obviously there's the on-field portion as well. And we felt as long as we brought in a player that could play in a similar role and have similar potential and talent, that it's something that we can weather. But I don't know.
I guess I would just ask, how do you feel you weathered that, and how would you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are unforeseen when situations like that happen. I think if it was like for like, I think it would have been a lot easier of a transition. I think the effect that it had on Chicho was big, and then obviously Chicho being suspended. So for as much as it was not having Andreas, it was for me, it was kind of the pair, and losing one of those guys I think is fine, but now there's a big load on Chicho to really make up a lot of the numbers that they put up. I think they were close to 60 goal creating opportunity, whether it was goals or assists, and I think that kind of down the stretch was really the issue with us, is that in front of goal we weren't making enough plays, and a lot of that obviously with a guy like Chicho falls, he's got to burden a lot of that, and it just wasn't clicking for him. And so I think, but what I said again about overcoming adversities, Diego Luna had to step up and found his way into some games. So again, I think oftentimes when we speak about these things, we speak in ideal terms, we speak in very black and white, and really it's never ideal. This profession is never ideal. And it's never black and white, because one decision will affect a couple others, some in a good way and some in a not so good way. But at the end of the day, and that's why I always talk about team, is that we've got to find collective solutions to making up for that. And I think we did a good job towards the end of part of the season is shoring up the defense, because I think you have to have a strong defense in games that are going to be tight. But we just could not find the same attacking form that we did early on in the season.
Hey, Pablo. You spoke a little bit earlier about the changes to your coaching staff. Can you tell us how you your coaching style or your approach evolved over the course of the season, and
Yeah.
if you think if you've targeted areas that you'd like to improve personally for next year?
Yeah, no, great question. We sat in the off season with Kurt and Jason, and it was amazing to see like in a couple years of not really scouting coaches, for lack of a better word, how progressive these guys are in the way they think, in the way they present. And for me, the biggest one was their ability to command control of the session the part of the session that they're running. I thought was really, because again, I think the old way of thinking was the head coach's voice is the only voice you hear during the training session. And going the way that we wanted to go was almost have an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. And then I'm tasked with kind of bringing it all together, and this is the way we think about the game, this is the way we approach the game, this is the way our mindset is. And initially, it was very difficult for myself, Nate Miller, and Anthony Pulis. And then Joel essentially worked with Nate as an attacking coach, and Hamison Olave worked with Ant as a defensive-minded coach. And so initially, the role, it was really strange for all of us. I wanted to be more hands-on, but I knew I had to leave space for them to feel comfortable and to trust. And so the three of us had quite a few meetings when this started, because someone always had some kind of like weird ego feelings, because they had been head coaches in the USL and had commanded the whole plate. And so I kept saying to them, well, last year I commanded 95% of this too. Like, so just for as uncomfortable as you feel, I feel the same way. And it just took a lot of communication, a lot of being vulnerable. But we found, and we got going right in preseason in Portugal, and it was awesome. And we talked, and we had debriefs after every session, just to make sure that everyone feels good about what we're doing and we're moving in the right direction. Is there anything that anyone feels uncomfortable with your role that's being given? And we just talked through it, and I couldn't be. And I think the proof is in the pudding. I think we got off to a great start of the campaign, and so a lot of credit to the coaches for understanding that we all have to give to the team, and even if that means ceding a little bit of the responsibilities that you've had in the past, but this is what we're all doing for the betterment of the team. And for me, it's just, again, the more I realize, the more I'm in coaching, the more I realize it's like any other business. You want good people, you want clear communication, you want standards that you have to maintain. But if you have good communication and you have good people, you can overcome a lot of difficult situations, and I think that's what we did this year.
Thank you. And Kurt, have you identified any areas of weakness or areas of potential improvement in the field, like roster-specific positions that you'd like to address for next year?
In terms of players?
Yes, sir. Are you looking for right backs? Or are you looking for wingers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always looking to improve the team, everywhere. I don't think, and if you look at the season we had, it's hard to say that there's a gaping hole in any particular spot. But I think improving, the balance of the team, adding a little more help defensively and depth defensively so that we have more solutions if there's an injury or suspension, when we hit those hardships, and the same thing in the attack. Obviously, with Chicho and how he finished the season, it's important that we find a way to support him and make sure that we'll put him in good chances to finish his chances, and so that involves maybe some addition in the attack. And again, back to kind of philosophically, what we do as a club, is finding another young, talented player that we can bring in and develop.
Thank you.
I'm curious, mention the back line. I know you brought Brown as an outside back, but do you see him as a center back, if not a starter, at least as a third or fourth?
Yeah, one of the reasons why we brought him in, I remember watching Javane in college, and he played center back in South Florida, and so we knew it was something he could do. He's obviously not as big as the traditional MLS center back, so it wasn't a role he settled into in MLS, but he can play right side of a three, he can play right wing back, he can play right back, and he had played right side center back of a three in MLS, so we felt Again, not that he was the 1 or 2 or 3 option there, but we felt confident that in a pinch he could give us good minutes there, and it was good to see that pay off.
Obviously, defensively, the club improved at the end of the year. A lot of shutouts, just an occasional goal here and there. And there have been switches at goalkeeping. Are you satisfied with what you see with your goalkeepers? Do you need to add somebody to the mix there?
That's a good question. I think we did go back and forth between the two, and it's something that we're going to have to discuss pretty in depth in the offseason. You know, Zach's a veteran, and I thought he finished the season with some really good performances that are what you need from your veteran players in those crunch times. And Gavin's a good young goalkeeper that we need to make sure we keep developing. So how we balance that is an important conversation as we head into the offseason.
Is Pablo Ruiz on track to be fully cleared and a full participant at the start of training camp?
He is on track for that. He's not officially fully cleared for it, but the last week or two, I think, or so, like, he's been in almost most of training. He's not fully cleared for game performance and 100%, but he's looking really good.
And just to add to that, he's got to come in preseason and hit some specific strength numbers on his knees in order to be cleared to be full go.
And time. Sorry, it's like time from surgery plus these strength numbers, and so we haven't hit the time either.
Looking forward to next year and making the team better, how much of that is bringing in more people, but how much of it is continuity? Because this club has had a distinct lack of continuity for a pretty long period of time. Is there a part of you that wants to just let everything sit for a year and see how much internal growth there is?
Do I have to accept the premise of that question? The lack of continuity?
You can do whatever.
I don't know if I feel there's a lack of continuity. I think, especially when you look at, like, Zach McMath has been here since I've been here, Justin Glad, Andrew Brody, Brian Ojeda came in, I think, in my first year. I don't know. I think we've had a handful of guys, a few guys that have been around for a good number of years. But yeah, we've done it every offseason, every summer, adding new players in the mix, having those players settle. That's gonna help. So I don't know that we've had a lack of continuity, but I think as we sign young players, one of the benefits of that is they are developing. They should be better next year than they were last year. We saw that this year with guys like Luna and Gomez, taking steps forward, and even Ojeda and Emeka Nelly, young players that took big steps forward that we made the decision in the offseason to rely upon, and they came through for us. So it's development. It's adding a few key pieces here and there, but I think continuity's been okay.
Pablo, you mentioned a little earlier about Diego Luna, a little bit as kind of an aside. The kid had a career best year. I think it's pretty clear he took a significant step forward in his overall career progression this season. What's kind of the next step for him in terms of career arc, in terms of kind of where he is with this team, and in terms of kind of what you view out of him? What's sort of the next step for Diego?
Yeah, I just think, again, finishing my career as a player at 38 and realizing that I left a lot on the table. I think every aspect of the game will continue to be critical for his growth and development. Just some highlights from Diego from last year is I think his leadership, and not so much vocally, but through his actions on both sides of the ball, was palpable this year. I think his understanding of the importance of getting closer to goal and being more selfish in and around goal instead of always looking for a pass, shooting, and I think he found his shooting form this year. Again, just being more goal dangerous, because again, when he first got here, I would have said Diego's a very talented player in the middle of the field. And now he's becoming a talented player around the box, and more importantly, scoring goals. And the other thing is, and I'll just go back to there's moments this year where he wasn't in great form, and he was surprised when I pulled him out of the team. And what I saw was an unbelievable response at any time that happened. In other words, a guy that believes in himself so much and use those moments when he's not starting in those games to reflect and do better and challenge himself. He's an amazing young man, and his story's incredible off the field, and how he parlays that to being a great soccer player, and those two coming together, I think, met this year. And I think the sky's the ceiling for Diego. You know, whether he stays with us or pursues something abroad, I think he's capable of achieving whatever he puts his mind to.
I'd follow up on that. I mean, is there, I guess, what are the thoughts on Diego and where he wants to be, where you want him in the club? Are there suitors kind of knocking at your door right now?
There are some people interested, some clubs interested in Diego. Obviously, he's a very talented young player, and he's got, you know, his career ambitions and his dreams. And when those things become real, you know, as it did with Andreas, then we'll sit down and have that conversation. And I think it's important that obviously we internally, you know, from the club standpoint, discuss and decide what we feel is best, but that we also share that conversation with the player and his agent, obviously, and his family, and make sure that we're making the right decision for everybody. We gave him a new deal at the beginning of this year. It wasn't a 2-year deal. We didn't think he was going to leave right away. It's a long-term deal. So, you know, we're happy with what Diego's done with us. And if he stays 5 years, that'd be great. If we sell him this winter, you know, and it's the right opportunity for him and the club, then that's great too. So we're open to both.
I just had one more to circle back on Chicho. I guess what can an offseason do? Maybe one, to get it, you know, clicking so he's back with, you know, I guess adjusted to the changes in the team, and then two, maybe just a hard reset after the suspension, just sort of mentally getting back to where he wants to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an important offseason, and one of the things I'm going to challenge the guys with, because again, I think we had a really good season, and you know, and the way I look at life is like, I have to get better, right? And I started writing down in my journal all these different aspects of, like, you know, when can I be more involved on the field to really hammer home a point? Like, just little things for me, like, these are, yeah, we had a good year, but it wasn't great. And it wasn't great because we didn't finish with the title. And I want to win titles, you know? And so, like, that's my challenge for all these guys, including Chicho, is like, you know, I think when you're a player, I mean, I can't imagine having the responsibility that he's had at every club he's been to. And they're huge, and his shoulders are huge. And when you go through a very difficult time, I don't even know how to help him, because I've never lived that type of burden. I've never been the guy to the level that Chicho's been here. And so I think for him is to double down on work in the offseason and, like, reframe the player that you want to be versus the player that you've been. Like, he's had incredible success to this point, and I'm saying, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is the Michael Jordan documentary, Last Dance. It's like, be that guy. Season's over, get to the weight room, or change, quit living in 2024 and start aiming for 2025. Is it a new body? Is it a new mindset? Is it both? Is it technical work? Is it shots in front? Like, just challenge yourself to be better, you know? And I think that, for me, starts taking away the past and starts focusing on the image that you want to see every day when you come into that locker room. And I think that's how I'm going to challenge a lot of the guys is for us to take that next step. We've proven in the last few years that we are a good team in this league. This year, we being in and around the top 3 for most of the season, I feel like we're a very good team in this league. So what's going to separate us? What's going to push us over the top? And the only way I know to do that is for all of us to look real closely at who we've been and change our habits to the people that we want to be in the future.
He asked part of what I wanted to ask you about Chicho, because you talked about getting him the support and helping him, and you mentioned a lot of stuff about on the field or soccer or the technical aspects of what he carries. But how do you help him, I guess, develop the emotional stamina or the strength to deal with leadership? Because one of the things that I wondered is, like, the identity of your club? Is it coming, especially when Diego was really, like you say, kind of taking it on and having those moments, like you could see that that brought people up. How can you help him with that? Can he be that guy?
Can Chicho be that guy? No, and Chicho was that guy for us for the first 7 months of the season. You know, I think, and I think this, again, I'm speaking from my experience as a human being. I'm not a guru of anything. I'm just speaking from a place of understanding of, like, when you are going through a really hard time in life, you essentially go into self-preservation mode. And when you're in that mode, you cannot give. You are taking, right? And so that's why I keep saying, you flip the brain and say, this is the body that I want to have. This is these are the visualizations I'm going to have every day in front of goal. This is the new me. And it's thinking that way. It's not dealing with the past. It's putting all your energy into the future, because that's what you can affect. And so with Chicho, I had conversations ad nauseum. And I left every conversation thinking to myself, I don't know if I reached him. And if I did, I don't know the depth of what he's going through. Again, because I have never lived, I've never taken a step in someone else's shoes. And so, and that's why I know, though, that if and I did this experiment with myself this year about changing my body, and that's why I'm using this body analogy. And I said to myself, I want to have the best body I've ever had in my life at 50. And every day I walk by the mirror, I'm in awe, and it drives me to keep doing it, right? And so, I don't know why I just shared that with you, but that's a little bit much. But anyways, my point is it's about the future, and that's what pulls you forward. If you sit here and try to reflect and fix the past, I think it's a dead man's game, because you will stew in that place. There's nothing positive that comes from that place. And that's more Carl Jung psychology, is thinking about who I am now and the person I want to be and working towards that. And that's...
So you talked about the goals, but so how do you define success then? It's interesting to me because, I'm doing the podcast on 2021, and you're in the absolute reverse position. I went to the Seattle post-game after they lost to you in an upset, and now you're on the other end of it. And one of the things that they struggled with that I wonder, because you say we had a great season, but everyone looks super sad and is disappointed, right? So how do you define success, and how do you take the things that were good, that were like the progress you did make, and not let it sort of get sucked into, but we weren't good enough? Or can you?
No, I don't think you ever get there. Like, success for me is, like, again, when we won an MLS Cup, a week after we won it, and I was a player, there was no more phone calls. There was no more people congratulating me. It was dead. It's done. That life is over. You got to move forward. And so, while we look at all the game model and hit all the statistics that are relevant to that game model, and look at those and go, man, we've made some unbelievable progress in all these areas. Then it's the mindset, the mentality. How can we keep making these little steps and to win a title? And then we might not win one for 3 years, but we're still making progress. And so, I think the players and everyone feel really good about the progress that we've made. But at the end of the day, in sports, it's like you want that picture on the podium with a trophy, because that, at the end of the day, is what we've all identified as success, right? And so it's not throwing all this away or not acknowledging this work. We have to do that and more to get to that podium. And so I think that's where the feeling of disappointment comes from. And unfortunately, there's only one team that's going to get that feeling, and the rest of us are chasing it. And that team's going to feel that feeling for 1 week. And then it's back to work, because preseason starts in 3 weeks. So it's it's a never-ending chase to be the best version of yourself. And if you can do that as a collective, then you have a great chance of standing on the podium.
Carlos?
Sí, hola. Pregunto para Kurt y también para
el técnico para Pablo Mastroeni. Para Kurt, lo primero es darle la enhorabuena porque no había tenido oportunidad por el buen trabajo en la construcción de la plantilla. Para mí la mejor plantilla de toda la historia del club. Y en ese sentido mi pregunta es si él considera dentro del club y él como representante un poco de la parte deportiva y de la parte también institucional, si ha sido un éxito o un fracaso la temporada, si se considera que ha sido un éxito o un fracaso. Y la segunda pregunta para él es, me están llegando rumores de salidas de varios jugadores de la plantilla y eso. Entonces mi pregunta es si le preocupa que pueda haber muchos cambios en la plantilla en esta temporada, en esta pretemporada.
So his question was about the roster for this year. What decisions led you to make those decisions for this year? And there's rumors that some players will leave. What would you say about that?
Decisions we made prior to the season, or the decisions we're
This
making
season.
now?
Both.
So what led us to the decisions we made prior to this season?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we looked at what we had. We tried to identify who were our key players, and then built around that, right? And so guys like, you know, Andreas, like Chicho, like Luna, you know, at the time obviously we had Pablo Ruiz penciled in there as someone coming back, Justin Glad, and how do we build around their strengths and suit their strengths, right? So bringing in with Diego coming in, bringing in a left back who could run the whole line like Alex Catranas was an important aspect. You know, as the season wore on, obviously finding more depth at center back became critical as well. Emeka Anelli's emergence, you know, helped with the eventual absence of Pablo Ruiz. But really, you know, and we do this every offseason, is we try to identify who are the guys that we think are central to what we're trying to do, that fit our game model, that fit our club and our club culture, and then we build around those guys and try to give them the pieces to succeed. As far as decisions and what's happening now and who might leave, that's something that obviously we're still discussing, or we've had discussions. We haven't had the opportunity to speak with the players yet at this stage, so it's not something we can get into at this point. But of course, you know, this is the business that we're in. Is there's turnover every off season. We have to say goodbye to some good people and some good players at times, but it's the way things go, and like Pablo said, we need to focus on the future and move forward.
La pregunta es si la temporada es un éxito o un fracaso para él.
¿Puedo repetirlo otra vez?
Si la temporada, la season, es un éxito o un fracaso para él.
Was the season a success for you?
Man, to piggyback on what Pablo just said, there's only I think one team at the end of the year that can truly say like this was a success, and you know, I've got no issues with how it went. Anytime we end up and we don't win MLS Cup, then it feels like a failure. But when you look at the things that we've done, the progression that we've made, you know, over the last 3 years, we've finished in progressively higher positions in the standings. We've achieved higher point totals each year in the regular season, you know, culminating this year in a club record. We've scored more goals each season, culminating in another club record this year, set a club record or tied a club record for an unbeaten streak in the middle of the year. We held first place for a long time. So, you know, I guess the phrase "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" comes to mind in terms of how we evaluate, you know, what the season meant or how it went. But emotionally, nobody's satisfied. Nobody's happy with how it ended. You know, we finished the season on an 8-game unbeaten run, and we're out of the playoffs. And that's incredibly disappointing and incredibly frustrating. And I think, you know, me personally and, you know, the staff and the players, I think that frustration is going to fuel the work that we do in the off-season and preseason and how we approach next year.
La segunda pregunta era los rumores. ¿Le preocupan las salidas de jugadores?
Does any leaving of players worry you for next season?
Worry? I'm not worried. I think
Para Pablo, sorry.
No, it's no worries. I mean, obviously we'll make those decisions, and you know, if we need to move someone out or someone's leaving and we need to replace them, you know, we feel we're prepared to make those decisions and those moves.
Para Pablo, la pregunta es frustración o satisfacción al final de esta temporada.
Are you frustrated or satisfied with this season?
Los dos. Satisfacción con el progreso que hemos hecho, pero claro, frustración que no pudimos seguir en los playoffs y ganar un título. Para mí eso, la única razón que hacemos esto es para llegar arriba con un trofeo. Y cada año que no lo tenés es un momento de frustración, pero tampoco es bueno no mirar para atrás y ver todo el progreso que hemos hecho cada año, mejorando poco a poco. Y yo creo que si seguimos mejorando, nos da más chance para ganar ese trofeo. Así hay que seguir trabajando duro y cambiando una cosita este año, el año pasado, para seguir con el puesto para ganar ese título y mantener ese nivel año por año.
Y la última pregunta
voy a
para
traducirlo.
ti. Sorry.
So what Pablo said is that he's both satisfied and frustrated. He's satisfied with the progression of the team, but frustrated that they didn't go far in the playoffs. Every year, that's what the team hopes for, to go win the cup. But you can't just look in the past, stay in the past. You got to look forward, and they want to keep on improving for next year.
La última pregunta para ti, Pablo. ¿Qué le vas a pedir a Santa para el próximo año, para la próxima temporada?
For next year.
Carlos. Un poco más suerte en los playoffs. No sé si lo usamos todo en 21, pero un poco más suerte en los playoffs.
A little more luck in playoffs.
Thank you.
Joseph?
Esa pregunta es para los dos. Con la Conca Champions en el siguiente año, ¿qué es lo que van a hacer en esta pretemporada de parte de conseguir y fichar y refichar jugadores y también en preparar el equipo como técnico?
How are you planning to prepare for the CONCACAF tournament coming up, players-wise and technical-wise?
So it should only start us a few days earlier than the MLS kickoff. But when you look at, from a player standpoint, it puts a little bit more pressure on us to try to do some things earlier in the off season if we can get it over the line. Obviously, with visas and these types of things, when we're signing foreign players, we need to give it some time before they can get on the ground and they're ready to play. But yeah, beyond that, in terms of how we're preparing, it changes. Preseason by a little bit, by a few days. We have to see when we get the draw who we're playing, and is it an MLS team, is it a Canadian team, is it an American team, is it a Mexican team or Central American team, and that will inform a little bit more of how we might prepare in preseason. Maybe we'll try to find an opponent that can show us some similar looks that we might face in that type of tie. But obviously. I think we're all excited to be back in the tournament after the club's been out of it for quite a while.
Sí, y para mí yo creo que la importancia de este torneo, el trabajo empezó ayer o antes de ayer, el lunes. O sea, le vamos a dar a todos los jugadores un plan físico bien específico para que llegamos al primer día de la pretemporada ya listo para entrenar. O sea, no podemos usar la pretemporada para sumar el tema físico. Y para mí es muy importante que ya empezamos a trabajar las tácticas y la tema técnica para estar bien preparado para el primer partido, que va a llegar un poco temprano que el año pasado.
For this tournament they already started working on Monday. They all gave the players a specific physical plan for them to do, and so when training starts, they're all ready.
And then I'll do my last question in English, mostly for Kurt. But with Andres Gomez leaving and Marchuk coming in, is I guess, are there plans with that money from Gomez and from Fidel Barajas that hasn't quite been used up, as if my math and the rumored amounts are quite correct? More plans to bring in any more high-profile players this year?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, we brought in 2 record fees in a row from the standpoint of both those sales, and obviously there's some money that goes out the door as well in sell-on percentage and things like that for both of those players. But there's money to invest in terms of the profile of the player. I look at it, and when I came here, this was one of the things that made me most excited to come to this club. Is I'm not worried about the players, their profile. Like I don't worry about the media attention one might get or the buzz. For me, the most important thing is can they help us win? Can they help us win a trophy? We just talked a bunch about how that's the thing that we're seeking. That's the thing that we're frustrated we didn't achieve this year, and that's the primary concern when signing these players, whether they cost $100,000 or $10 million. The only important thing, the only thing they need to be for me is helping us win trophies.
Anybody else on Zoom? Maddie?
Anybody else in the room?
Kurt, the league has changed quite a few things this year. Can you tell us if you've heard anything at all about RSL's potential involvement in Open Cup next year, and what you might theoretically think about a winter-spring schedule change?
As far as Open Cup, I think there hasn't been anything decided at this point. I think there's a very high chance that it pursues a similar model as this year, but again, nothing is baked in. As far as the winter schedule, I don't know. It's pretty cold outside right now, so we'd like to be playing when it's really cold outside because that means we're in MLS Cup with this schedule. So from that standpoint, that'd be sure games in December. But I think there's just a lot of considerations that go into that. Certainly, there's in-market considerations at different clubs with weather, field conditions, facilities, and those types of things that will come into play. Attendance at games, I think a big contention is when our playoffs fall during the year, and should they fall in a part of the year where maybe they can get more attention, which will help the league as a whole. And then from a transfer window standpoint, again, we've talked about Andres Gomez a bit this year, and certainly there's some advantages to lining up our off season with the European off season in terms of being able to sell players that don't disrupt us in mid-year. So that those would be some benefits, but it's none of these types of decisions are all good or all bad. They're very nuanced, and some people will be happy, some people won't. I think everyone will be affected both positively and negatively if they make that type of change, but I think it's very preliminary at this stage and nothing anybody should be planning on just yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yep.
Pablo, Kurt, thank you. Appreciate your honesty.
You're welcome. What's that?
Ingenuity.
No, and thank you guys for asking good questions. I think oftentimes these things are a bore, but since I've been here with you guys, oftentimes I leave games and reflecting on some of the questions you guys asked. So grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.